deep in the heart of an old, abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town, where ivy crept up the crumbling walls and the wind whispered through broken windows, there lived a darkness that defied explanation. Local legend spoke of a family who once dwelled there, driven mad by grief and despair after a series of tragic deaths. It was said their restless spirits still roamed the halls, seeking revenge on any who dared disturb their eternal torment. One stormy night, a group of thrill-seeking teenagers decided to explore the mansion, drawn by tales of its haunting. Armed with flashlights and nervous laughter, they entered the decrepit building, unaware of the horrors awaiting them. As they ventured deeper into the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, the air grew colder and heavier with each step. Shadows danced ominously along the walls, and strange whispers echoed through the empty rooms, though no one spoke. Suddenly, a chilling voice pierced the silence, a mournful wail that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The teenagers froze, their hearts pounding in terror as they searched for the source of the sound. In the dim light of their flashlights, they saw her, a spectral figure dressed in tattered clothes, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly intensity. Her pale face twisted in anguish as she floated towards them, emitting an eerie glow that cast long, menacing shadows. Unable to move, they watched in horror as the ghostly apparition reached out with ethereal hands, fingers curling like claws. A cold gust of wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing their flashlights and plunging them into darkness. In the blackness, they felt a presence closing in around them, an oppressive weight that pressed down on their chests, suffocating and relentless. Whispers grew louder, filling their minds with incomprehensible dread. Desperate, they groped in the darkness, scrambling to find an exit, but the mansion seemed to twist and turn, leading them deeper into its haunted depths. The air grew thick with the scent of decay, and the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Just as they thought all hope was lost, a faint glimmer of moonlight appeared ahead. A small window, barred and forgotten. With renewed determination, they rushed towards it, clawing at the ancient bars until they broke free, shards of rusted metal falling to the ground. They scrambled through the window, heedless of the jagged glass that tore at their clothes and skin. Outside, the storm raged on, thunder crashing and lightning illuminating the mansion in stark, eerie flashes. As they fled into the night, they dared not look back. The mansion loomed behind them, its dark silhouette against the tumultuous sky. They ran until their legs gave out, hearts racing with the terror of what they had witnessed. And though they escaped physically, they knew they could never truly leave the horror of that mansion behind. For in their nightmares, the mournful wail echoed still, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks in forgotten places, waiting to claim those who dare to seek its secrets. The teenagers stumbled through the storm, their clothes soaked and their hearts pounding with fear. Rain lashed at their faces as they ran blindly through the overgrown grounds surrounding the mansion. Each step seemed to echo with the haunting whispers that still rang in their ears. They eventually found themselves at the edge of a dense forest, its trees looming like silent sentinels in the night. Without a word, they plunged into the darkness, hoping to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the malevolent presence they had encountered. Branches clawed at their skin, roots threatened to trip them at every turn, but they pushed onward driven by sheer terror and adrenaline. They dared not stop to catch their breath, convinced that if they did, the darkness would consume them. Hours passed, the storm eventually subsiding into a drizzle, and exhaustion began to weigh heavily on their limbs. They finally came to a halt in a small clearing, surrounded by towering trees that whispered eerily in the gentle breeze. Huddled together for warmth and comfort, they exchanged nervous glances, each one silently reliving the horrors of the mansion. Their minds raced with questions. Who was the ghostly figure they had seen? What had happened to the family that once lived there? And most importantly, were they truly safe now? As they tried to make sense of their ordeal, a new sense of unease settled over them. Despite being out of the mansion, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows danced on the periphery of their vision, and the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the silence, a low, mournful moan that sent shivers down their spines. They froze, hearts pounding once again as they strained to locate the source of the noise. It echoed through the trees, growing louder and more desperate with each passing moment. Then, from the darkness emerged a figure. A woman dressed in ragged clothes, her hair tangled and wild. She moved slowly towards them, her eyes hollow and filled with an inexplicable sorrow. Fear paralyzed the teenagers as they realized it was the same ghostly apparition they had encountered in the mansion. She reached out with translucent hands, fingers curling like claws, and a cold gust of wind swept through the clearing, chilling them to the bone. One of the teenagers, driven by panic, screamed and bolted once more, breaking the trance that held the group. The others followed suit, crashing through the underbrush in a blind attempt to escape the specter that pursued them. They ran deeper into the forest, their breaths ragged and their hearts pounding in their chests. Branches whipped at their faces. Roots threatened to trip them at every turn, but still they pressed on, driven by pure terror. Eventually, they stumbled upon an old, overgrown path that seemed to lead out of the forest. They raced along it, the sound of their footsteps drowned out by the pounding of their hearts. The ghostly wails faded behind them, swallowed by the oppressive darkness of the forest. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they burst through the trees and into the open, gasping for breath as they collapsed onto the muddy ground. The sky above them was clear now, the moon casting a faint silver glow over the landscape. They lay there for a long time, shaken and exhausted, but grateful to be free of the haunted mansion and the relentless pursuit of its tormented spirit. They knew they had escaped with their lives, but the memory of that night would haunt them forever. A chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in forgotten places, waiting to ensnare those who dare to seek its secrets. As the teenagers lay there, catching their breath under the moonlit sky, a sense of unease still lingered in the air. They were out of the immediate reach of the haunted mansion and its ghostly inhabitant, but the ordeal had left them shaken to their core. One of them, Alex, finally broke the heavy silence that hung over them like a shroud. What do we do now?" Their voice trembled, betraying the fear that still gripped them. No one had an answer. They were disoriented, deep in the woods with no clear path back to town. The storm had passed, leaving the night eerily quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves and distant calls of nocturnal animals. "We need to find our way back," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced around, trying to orient herself in the darkness. There must be a road or something nearby. They gathered their waning courage and rose to their feet, limbs stiff from fear and exhaustion. Slowly, they began to walk, navigating through the underbrush and fallen branches as they searched for any sign of civilization. Minutes stretched into hours as they stumbled through the woods, unsure if they were getting closer to safety or deeper into the unknown. The forest seemed endless, the trees closing in around them like gnarled fingers clawing at the sky. Just when hope began to falter, they stumbled upon a narrow dirt road cutting through the forest. Relief washed over them as they realized they had found a way out. Without hesitation, they followed the road, their pace quickening with each step. As they walked, they recounted the events of the night, piecing together fragments of their terrifying experience. Each of them had seen the ghostly figure, felt the oppressive presence that had driven them to the brink of madness. It was a shared nightmare that bound them together in a bond forged by fear. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of an approaching vehicle. Hearts racing once more, they flagged down a passing car, a weary traveler who stopped to offer them a ride back to town. Grateful beyond words, they piled into the back seat, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. The driver, an older man with a kind face, noticed their disheveled appearance and asked if they were okay. Unable to articulate the horrors they had faced, they simply nodded, their eyes filled with haunted expressions. As the car carried them away from the forest, the mansion, and the ghostly apparition that had haunted their nightmares, they found solace in the warm glow of streetlights and the familiar sights of civilization. They were finally safe, surrounded by the mundane comforts of everyday life. But as they parted ways with the kind stranger and returned to their homes, They knew that some horrors cannot be left behind so easily. The memory of that night would linger in their minds, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in forgotten places, waiting to ensnare the unwary and the curious. And though they would try to move on with their lives, they would forever carry the weight of that night, a testament to the thin veil that separates the living from the dead and the enduring power of fear in the face of the unknown. Days turned into weeks, and the events of that harrowing night continued to haunt the teenagers. Each of them struggled to find peace in the wake of their terrifying encounter with the ghostly figure in the mansion. Sleep eluded them, plagued by nightmares that transported them back to the dark corridors and chilling whispers of that forsaken place. Sarah found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, half expecting to see the spectral woman standing at the edge of her vision. Every creak of a floorboard or whisper of the wind sent chills down her spine, reminding her of the relentless pursuit they had escaped. Alex became withdrawn, his once lively demeanor replaced by a haunted silence. He immersed himself in research, scouring books and online forums for any mention of the mansion and its tragic history. The more he learned, the more the lines between folklore and reality blurred, leaving him with unsettling questions about what they had truly encountered. Emma sought solace in distraction, throwing herself into schoolwork and extracurricular activities with a fervor that bordered on obsession. She avoided any mention of that fateful night, burying her fears beneath a facade of normalcy while secretly grappling with the lingering dread that refused to fade. Jake, the most skeptical of the group before their ordeal, found himself grappling with newfound beliefs. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something beyond rational explanation, something that defied the laws of the known world. His skepticism eroded in the face of inexplicable events, leaving him with a profound sense of unease. Despite their attempts to move forward, they found themselves drawn back to the mansion in their thoughts. They debated returning, seeking closure or answers that might lay hidden within its decaying walls. But fear held them back, a primal instinct warning them against tempting fate a second time. One evening, a month after their escape, a letter arrived at each of their homes. The envelopes were weathered and yellowed, the handwriting elegant yet faded with age. Inside, a single line of text sent a chill down their spines. "Come back. The truth awaits." The letters bore no signature, no return address, only the faint scent of old paper and a lingering sense of foreboding. They gathered once more, reluctantly united by curiosity and a shared desire to unravel the mystery that had gripped their lives since that fateful night. With trepidation, they returned to the forest where the mansion loomed like a dark specter against the moonlit sky. The path was overgrown, nature reclaiming the once manicured grounds with a relentless determination. As they approached the mansion, they felt a palpable shift in the air, a heaviness that settled over them like a shroud. The front door stood slightly ajar, inviting them into the darkness within. With a collective breath, they crossed the threshold once more, stepping into the echoing silence of the abandoned halls. Inside, the mansion seemed unchanged yet somehow different. Shadows danced on the walls, casting twisted shapes that seemed to writhe and pulse with a life of their own. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of decay, a reminder of the mansion's slow descent into ruin. They moved cautiously through the labyrinthine corridors, guided by a sense of purpose mixed with apprehension. Whispers echoed around them, unintelligible yet laden with emotion, grief, rage, and an unquenchable longing that clawed at their sanity. In a forgotten corner of the mansion, they discovered a hidden room, a chamber obscured by layers of dust and cobwebs. Inside, they found relics of the past, a tattered diary, old photographs yellowed with age, and mementos that spoke of lives shattered by tragedy. As they sifted through the artifacts, piece by piece, the story of the mansion unfolded before them, a tale of love and loss, of betrayal and despair that had bound the family to this place even in death. They learned of the woman whose spirit they had encountered, a mother whose grief had consumed her soul and driven her to seek vengeance beyond the grave. But as they delved deeper, they realized they were not alone. The presence that had haunted them returned, its ethereal form flickering in and out of existence like a phantom in the mist. The air grew colder, charged with an energy that crackled with intensity. The ghostly figure stood before them once more, her eyes filled with sorrow and a longing that transcended time itself. She reached out with spectral hands, fingers outstretched as if pleading for understanding. In that moment, fear gave way to empathy, and the teenagers realized the truth. They were not just witnesses to a haunting but bearers of a responsibility. The mansion held secrets that demanded acknowledgement, wounds that begged for healing beyond the grave. With trembling hands, they offered the ghostly figure the diary they had found, the pages worn and tear-stained with the weight of untold sorrow. As she read the words written in anguish, her form shimmered with a faint, ethereal light, a reflection of the peace she had sought for centuries. And then, as suddenly as she had appeared, the ghostly figure vanished, leaving behind a sense of quiet serenity that filled the room. The mansion seemed to sigh with relief, its oppressive atmosphere lifting like a veil. The teenagers stood in silence, their hearts heavy yet strangely lightened by the catharsis of the moment. They knew they had played a part in setting a restless spirit free, in finding closure for a tragedy that had gripped the mansion for generations. As they left the mansion for the final time, the moon shone bright overhead, casting a silvery glow over the worn steps and ivy-covered walls. They walked away with a newfound understanding of the fragile boundary between life and death, and a deep respect for the mysteries that lie hidden in the shadows of forgotten places. And though they would never forget the horrors they had faced, they carried with them a sense of peace, a reminder that even in darkness, there is always a glimmer of light waiting to be found. As the teenagers left the mansion behind, their minds raced with thoughts of what they had experienced. The weight of the encounter lingered, both unsettling and strangely comforting in its resolution. They walked in silence for a while, each lost in their own reflections. It was Emma who finally broke the quiet, her voice hesitant yet determined. "Do you think she's finally at peace?" Her eyes searched the faces of her friends, seeking reassurance in their shared experience. Alex nodded slowly, his expression contemplative. "I think so," felt different when she disappeared, like a burden had been lifted. Sarah glanced back at the mansion, now a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. "I hope she found what she was looking for. It's tragic, all of it." Jake remained quiet, still processing the events of the night. He had been the most skeptical, yet now he couldn't deny the reality of what they had witnessed. "I don't think we'll ever truly understand everything about that place. But maybe that's okay." They walked on, the forest gradually thinning as they neared the outskirts of town. The night air was cool and crisp, carrying with it the promise of a new day. For the first time since their initial encounter with the mansion, a sense of closure settled over them. As they reached the edge of town, they exchanged solemn nods and quiet words of gratitude. They knew their bond had deepened through their shared ordeal, forging a connection that transcended mere friendship. They had faced fear and uncertainty together, emerging stronger for it. In the days that followed, they found themselves drawn back to normalcy, though the memory of the mansion and its ghostly inhabitant remained etched in their minds. They sought solace in the familiarity of their routines, grateful for the mundane distractions that kept their thoughts from drifting back to that fateful night. Months passed, and life moved forward. The mansion became a distant memory, a chapter in their lives that they seldom spoke of but would never forget. They grew closer as friends, bound by a silent understanding of the unseen forces that had brought them together. Occasionally, they would catch glimpses of each other in passing, sharing a knowing smile or a brief exchange that spoke volumes without words. They had been changed by their encounter, each carrying a piece of the mansion's history within them. One evening, as they gathered for a quiet dinner at a local diner, a familiar face caught their attention. A man with weathered features and a twinkle in his eye. It was the kind stranger who had offered them a ride on that stormy night, the catalyst for their journey into the unknown. He approached their table with a warm smile, a sense of recognition lighting up his face. "I heard you all had quite an adventure out there," he remarked, his voice tinged with curiosity and admiration. They exchanged grateful glances, silently acknowledging the role he had played in their escape from the forest and the comfort he had provided in their moment of need. They thanked him profusely, their words tinged with a newfound sense of closure and gratitude. As they parted ways once more, the man's words lingered in their minds, a reminder of the interconnectedness of their experiences and the mysteries that bound them together. They knew they would carry the lessons of that night with them always, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of friendship. And though the mansion remained abandoned, its secrets hidden within its crumbling walls, they found peace in knowing they had confronted their fears and emerged stronger for it. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them but the light they discovered in its midst, a light that had guided them through their darkest hour and illuminated the path ahead. Years passed since that fateful night at the mansion. The teenagers had grown into young adults, their lives moving forward with careers, relationships, and new experiences. Yet, the memories of their encounter with the haunted mansion remained a profound and transformative chapter in their lives. Sarah had pursued her passion for history, becoming an archaeologist who specialized in uncovering forgotten stories of the past. She often found herself drawn to tales of ghostly encounters and mysterious disappearances, each discovery fueling her curiosity about the realms beyond our understanding. Alex had channeled his fascination with the paranormal into a career as a writer, penning novels that blended elements of horror and mystery. His books captivated readers with their vivid descriptions of haunted places and the human resilience in the face of supernatural phenomena. Emma had found purpose in advocating for mental health awareness, drawing from her own struggles with anxiety following their haunting experience. She spoke openly about the importance of confronting fears and seeking support, inspiring others to acknowledge their vulnerabilities without shame. Jake had embarked on a career in engineering, his logical mind now tempered with a deep respect for the unknown. He approached life with a newfound sense of humility, recognizing that there were mysteries in the universe that defied scientific explanation. Despite their divergent paths, they remained connected by the bond forged in the shadows of the haunted mansion. They would occasionally reunite over dinners or weekend getaways, sharing stories and reminiscing about that night that had changed their lives forever. One summer evening, they received an unexpected invitation. A local historian had uncovered new information about the mansion's history and wanted to share it with them. Intrigued and apprehensive, they agreed to meet at a quaint cafe on the outskirts of town. The historian, a soft-spoken man with a passion for local lore, greeted them warmly as they gathered around a table in the corner. He spread out old maps, faded photographs, and documents that chronicled the mansion's past, painting a vivid picture of the family who had once called it home. They learned of the patriarch, a wealthy businessman whose ambition knew no bounds, and his wife, a woman of grace and intellect who had nurtured their children with love and devotion. Tragedy had struck the family when their youngest child fell ill and passed away within the mansion's walls, sending the family into a downward spiral of grief and despair. The historian spoke of rumors surrounding the mansion, the whispers of a curse that had befallen the family, driving them to madness and eventual ruin. He recounted sightings of a woman in white, wandering the halls in search of her lost child, her anguished cries echoing through the empty rooms. As they listened, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. They realized that the ghostly figure they had encountered was none other than the grieving mother, trapped between worlds by the weight of her sorrow and the unresolved emotions that bound her to the mansion. Moved by the historian's revelations, they exchanged somber glances, each grappling with their own reflections on the past. They had come full circle, confronting the mysteries that had drawn them together and shaped their lives in ways they could never have imagined. With a newfound sense of closure, they bid farewell to the historian and left the cafe, the evening sun casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets. They walked in silence, the weight of their shared history settling comfortably between them. As they reached the edge of town, they paused to admire the view, a panorama of rolling hills and distant mountains bathed in the golden hues of twilight. The world seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a moment of quiet reverence for the journey they had undertaken together. And though they knew their lives would continue to unfold with new adventures and challenges, they carried with them the lessons learned from their encounter with the haunted mansion, a testament to the enduring power of stories, the resilience of the human spirit, and the profound connections that bind us all. As they embraced the future with open hearts and minds, they knew they would always carry a piece of that night with them, a reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of our understanding, waiting to be explored and understood. And so, with a sense of peace and gratitude, they turned towards the horizon and walked into the fading light, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead on their journey through life.